If you're new to serging, a great starter project is to make a t-shirt. It's simple to make, and in this video, I'll show you how from start to finish. You'll use the serger wherever possible, but if you don't have a serger, you can still sew everything on a regular sewing machine. I have links to videos in the description. The pattern for the t-shirt I'm making has just 6 pieces: a front, a back, a sleeve, a neckband, a back facing, and a front pocket. The back facing and front pocket are optional details, so you can skip them to make the project even easier. You can cut them from a contrasting fabric. I traced this pattern from the original using a seam allowance of 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter. This allows me to trim 1/8 inch with the serger cutter blades, leaving a 1/4 inch, 7 millimeter seam allowance. I have links to some t-shirt patterns similar to this one in the description. If your pattern does not have the facing or pocket pattern pieces, you can download them free from my website. The link is in the description. Most t-shirts are made from a simple cotton jersey knit, but you can use nearly any light or medium weight knit fabric. Use a general purpose thread on the conventional machine and cones of serger thread on the serger. Serger thread is lighter weight to avoid bulkiness in seams. The additional threads in a serger stitch provide the necessary strength. For certain portions of the project, you'll need some stretchable stay tape or fusible knit interfacing. You will also need some non-stretchable tape, such as twill tape or rayon seam binding tape for some seams. It's important to use a jersey or ballpoint needle to sew knit fabrics. Ballpoint needles have a rounder tip that does not harm the threads of knit fabrics and avoids skipped stitches. If your fabric is very stretchy, or stretchy in both directions, you may need a stretch needle. You can use a 70-10 or 75-11 size needle with t-shirt jersey knits, an 80-12 for an interlock jersey, or a 90-14 needle for thicker fabrics such as double knits. You'll also need some sewing tracing paper or washable fabric markers for marking the fabric, plus pins or sewing clips. There are links to purchase tools and supplies in the description. Before cutting and sewing, it is a good idea to pre-wash all raw fabrics. Even knit fabrics can shrink when they are washed for the first time. Also, pre-washing removes any chemical treatments applied at the fabric mill. You should pre-wash your fabric using the same detergents, water temperature, and other laundry settings that you will use for the finished shirt. Press your fabric before cutting to remove wrinkles and get a more accurate cut. Use an iron temperature appropriate for your fabric and press gently, sliding the iron along the direction with the least stretch. If the fabric is stretchy in all directions, lift and press the iron. Don't slide. I have a separate video that covers the best way to lay out, cut, and mark a pattern in knit fabrics. Check it out to learn more. You might be surprised to learn how it differs from cutting woven fabrics. The t-shirt is constructed in the following order. First, prep and attach the front pocket. Then, attach the back facing to the inside of the back piece. Then, join the fronts and backs at the shoulder seams. This completes the neckline, so prepare and attach the neckband. The sleeves are attached while the armhole is still flat. Close the side seams and underarms with one long seam on each side. Finally, hem the sleeves and waistband. The edges of the armhole and the sleeve are very different, and we'll learn how to join these opposing curves with the serger. The t-shirt has a front pocket, which is best prepared and attached using a conventional sewing machine. If you don't want a front pocket, you can skip this part. The upper edge of the pocket folds inward to make a finished top edge. Apply some interfacing to the inside of this fold to prevent it from looking droopy. You can use fusible knit interfacing, as shown here, or a fusible stay tape. Place the interfacing or stay tape right at the fold line, marked here with an erasable marker. Cut it slightly smaller than the pocket flap with no seam or hem allowances. Press to set the interfacing. Fold the hem allowance to the inside, using the inner facing as a guide, and press to set the hem edge. Fold inwards a second time and make a final press to set the pocket edge. To close the upper pocket edge, tack it down with a straight stitch or a twin needle stitch. Use a 2.5 stitch length and do not backstitch. Then, at the pocket edges, fold all seam allowances inwards and press. To press crisp edges, use a pressing template. Cut it from lightweight cardboard, such as a file folder, using the pattern piece as a guide, but without seam allowances. Fold and press with the template as a guide. Come in towards the fold from the outside with the iron. Remove the pocket template, then press the folds a second time to make them crisp and set better. Here's what the project looks like at this point. We've completed the pocket and it is ready to attach to the shirt front. Meanwhile, the rest of the shirt is unassembled. Position the pocket on the right side of the shirt front, matching pocket corners to the placement markings. Pin it in place. Take this opportunity to trim some bulk from the seam allowances at the top of the pocket. I trim out the innermost layers but leave the outer fold as is. Then stabilize the edges by hand basting. With very stretchy fabric, a washable stabilizer tape is more effective than basting. Choose the method that works best for your project. Once the edges are stabilized, remove the pins. Make an erasable mark about 1/4 inch in from the top corners of the pocket. Edge stitch the pocket. Use a stitch length of 2.5. Start from the bottom of the inside fold with no back stitching. Stitch up to the mark on the top edge, then pivot, stitch to the corner, then around the sides and bottom of the pocket. Guide the pocket edge with an edge stitching foot, or sight the edge against a mark or other feature of your regular presser foot. At corners, you can raise the presser foot and needle, nudge the fabric very slightly, then sink the needle exactly at the corner. Pivot, lower the presser foot, and continue stitching. Especially with very stretchy fabrics, every now and then stop with the needle down, raise the presser foot, allow the fabric to relax, then lower the presser foot and continue. It can also help to lower the presser foot pressure adjustment. End the stitch on the other side the same way you started, with no back stitching. Pull out the basting stitches. Pull the thread tails to the inside with a hand needle. Tie off and trim. Then press the pocket once more. And if you find this tutorial helpful, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. At this point, the pocket is completely done, but the shirt is still in separate pieces. This t-shirt also has a back facing, applied to the inside back at the neckline. As with the pocket, this detail is optional and is applied with the conventional sewing machine. Using a pressing template, press under the edges of the back facing as we did with the pocket. You can also use a press cloth as a tool to press the fold over the template edge. Remove the template and press the edges a second time. Position the facing with the wrong side of the facing meeting the wrong side or inside of the shirt back, matching notches at the neckline. Pin around the edge of the facing, then stabilize the edge by hand basting or washable stabilizer tape. Finally, remove the pins. Edge stitch the back facing just as you did for the pocket. To cleanly start this seam, start the stitch on an anchor cloth of scrap fabric. Run the neck edge of the shirt against the anchor cloth, then stitch off the anchor cloth onto the shirt back, no back stitching. At the end of the stitch, remove the basting stitches and press. At this point, the back facing has been applied, and the front and back pieces are finally ready to be joined. While we have the conventional sewing machine out, now is a good time to prepare the neckband. Match short ends of the neckband, right sides together, and seam them together to make a circular band. Press the seam allowances open. Fold the neckband in half lengthwise, seam allowance towards the inside, and press. Here is the completed neckband ready to be attached to the neckline. The seam will be placed at center back. Before serging, test and adjust the serger settings using some scrap fabric from your project. Thread your serger for a 4-thread overlock stitch. If you don't have 4 cones of serger thread in matching colors, use your best match in the needles and the remaining thread in the loopers. You can also use a neutral color such as gray in the loopers. You can wind a sewing machine bobbin and use it on the serger, but the loopers consume thread quickly and a bobbin can run out right in the middle of serging a seam. If you use a bobbin, it's best to use it only for the needles. My pattern uses a 3/8 inch, 10 mm seam allowance, but the serger has no seam allowance marker, so I placed a piece of tape at the 3/8 inch point. Use a stitch width of 1/4 inch, 7 mm, and a stitch length of 2.5. Make a test seam with 2 layers of the same fabric as the shirt, then check the stitch quality. The first test stitch came out wavy, so I will raise the differential feed from N to a setting around 1.5 and test again. After I raise the differential feed to around 1.75, I get a flat seam. If your fabric is thick or very stretchy, you may also need to lower the foot pressure to get a flat seam. If you would like to know more about the differential feed and how to use it in your projects, I have a video. The link is in the description. After all other settings are in order, check the thread tension. The tension looks okay because the looper stitches all wrap the cut edge cleanly. And if you need help adjusting your serger thread tensions, I have a video in the works on this topic. Look in the description for the link when it is available. To keep the shoulder seams from stretching out of shape after repeated wearings, permanently stabilize them with some interfacing. To do this, you can serge a strip of woven fabric, twill tape, or stay tape directly into the seam. I chose a strip of woven rayon seam binding because it is thin and adds very little bulk while removing all stretch from the seam. You can also use clear elastic or knit stay tape if you want to reinforce the shoulder seam, but still retain some elasticity. Begin by feeding the ribbon into the machine an inch or so ahead of the garment and just next to the cutting blade. Then raise the presser foot and slide the garment underneath. Lower the presser foot and serge with the back of the garment towards the feed dogs to allow the differential feed to stabilize the fabric. It is not important for the cutter blades to trim the stay tape, only that the tape is incorporated into the seam. To save some time, you can serge both shoulder seams one after the other on the same line of ribbon. Fold the seam allowances towards the back of the garment and press. Serger stitches naturally fold to the lower looper side. With the back serged facing the lower looper, the seam allowance will naturally fold towards the back. At this point, front and back are connected at the shoulder, which also closes the neckline. Next, attach the neckband to the neckline. Most neckbands, collars, and cuffs sewn in knits have a slightly smaller circumference than the opening on the garment they attach to. This prevents a neckline that gapes or looks droopy. To match the neckband to the neckline, we need to stretch the neckband a bit while we serge, and we need to distribute that stretch evenly around the neckline. We'll do this with a technique called quarter marking. Begin by dividing the neckband into quarters. First, place a pin in the neckband at the seam line. That marks the center back. From there, flatten the neckband. Place a pin at the other fold, which marks the center front. Bring the pins together, flatten the neckband again, and mark the outer folds with pins. The neckband is now evenly divided into 4 equal segments. Use the same procedure to quarter mark the neckline. Place pins at center back and center front. Then, bring the pins together and flatten the neckline to find the mark point near the shoulders. Note carefully that the shoulder points do not fall at the same place as the shoulder seams. Mark these 2 points with pins. Attach the neckband to the right side of the neckline, aligning raw edges. Begin at center back, match corresponding pins on the neckband to the neckline, and pin together. Then do the same at the other 3 marks. For this step, I use fabric clips because they are safer for the serger than pins. If I forget to remove a clip, the presser foot will block it and it cannot reach the cutter blades. If you use pins, be very careful to remove them before they reach the presser foot to avoid damaging the machine. Before serging, check your machine's adjustments one more time. This step involves serging several layers of fabric, so you may want to lower the presser foot pressure to avoid stretching the fabric and creating a gaping neckline. Start just ahead of center back. Raise the presser foot, align the neckline close to and at a slight angle alongside the needle and cutter blades. The inside neckline faces the feed dogs and the neckband faces up. Then lower the presser foot. Begin serging and immediately angle into the neckline until the needle and cutter blades reach the proper seam allowance. Then straighten out and stop. At the next quarter mark, grab all layers and pull back lightly. Stretch the neckband just enough so that the neckband and the neckline are the same length. No more, no less. Check to make sure that the raw edges are still aligned, then serge that fourth of the neckline. Repeat this procedure around the entire neckline. Practice with some scrap fabric until you are familiar with the technique. When you reach center back, overlap the initial stitch by a small amount, allowing the cutter blade to trim and enclose the initial thread tail. Then angle away and serge off. Bury the ending thread tail in the serger loops with a hand embroidery needle and trim the excess. Fold the neckband seam allowance towards the garment and press. Press the neckband on a pressing ham to shape the neckline the way it is worn. At this point, the neckline is almost complete and the project is starting to look like a t-shirt. To stabilize the back neckline and to prevent the seam from irritating the neck when worn, apply tape to the back neckline as we did with the shoulder seams. Cut a length of twill tape or rayon seam binding, fold in both raw ends about 3/8 of an inch, 10 millimeters, then pin along the back neckline, covering the line of serging. Pin along the edges, then check on the reverse side that the pins lie in the ditch of the neckline seam. Using a conventional sewing machine, edge stitch the top edges of the twill tape to secure it in place with a 2.8 straight stitch, no back stitching. Guide the edge of the tape along a mark or feature of the presser foot, or use an edge stitching foot. Edge stitch the bottom edge of the tape the same way. Pin along the edge, then check the placement of the pins on the reverse side. Edge stitch. Pull the thread tails inside the garment with a hand needle, then tie off and trim. At this point, the neckline is now fully complete. Next, attach the sleeves. Match the sleeves to the armhole curve right sides together. Match the front single notch and the back double notches. Pin or clip at the notches, at the top of the shoulder, and at the ends of the seam. The sleeve cap is convex, but the armhole it sews into is concave. To serge these opposing curves, Begin by placing the armhole side towards the feed dogs, sleeve facing up. Serge for a very short length, then stop. Align the raw edges of both layers over a short distance. Serge a little more, and stop once more. Repeat this process until you reach the end of the seam. At the places where the sleeve and armhole curve most strongly, align and serge over a shorter distance than with the less curved segments. Every time you engage the serger, first feel both layers with your hands to make sure they are not bunching or pinching. Don't stretch the layers of fabric. Just align the edges and allow the serger feed to do the work. Press the sleeve seam allowances towards the body of the garment. Use a pressing ham to shape the sleeve and armhole the way it is worn. At this point, the sleeves are attached and the body of the shirt is ready to be closed. Next, serge the side seams. The side seams run the entire length of the garment from the bottom hem through the underarm point, ending at the sleeve hem. Match fronts to backs with right sides together, matching at the notches. At the underarm seams, you can fold the front and back seam allowances to opposite sides to avoid bulking up the seam. Pin or clip along the length of the entire seam from the waist hem edge all the way up through the sleeve hem edge. Serge the side seams from hem to hem. The back of the garment faces the feed dogs and the front faces up. When you reach the underarm point, stop, lift the pressure foot, and use a stiletto to nudge the seam evenly into the feed dogs. Press the side seams, folding the seam allowances towards the back of the garment. At this point, with side seams and sleeves closed, the shirt is almost complete. To finish the shirt, I have a separate video that covers 4 ways to hem knit fabrics with a serger. Check it out for all the details. After hemming, your new t-shirt is complete and ready to wear. For more videos like this one, like and subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated.